Okay, so the plan is tonight to go through the sugya of the first story of Ronyah and Robinah, the neighbors. And tomorrow night we'll do the second story between Ronyah and Robinah, the neighbors. Like last time, even though we didn't finish every single Tosafos, we're dedicating tonight to this sugya, and that's going to be it. Then we'll go to the next one. And next week, Mr. Hashem, we'll get to the Mishnah, which is a whole new sugya, a very geshmaka and deep sugya. If you have the Gemara in front of you, this is going to be best.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Just curious. Ronyah is like a regular person, or he's also a chaver?
I was actually thinking about that, but I don't think he's a Talmud Chacham or anything like that. It doesn't seem like it. I've never heard the name before.
Okay.
And there's no implication. Like there's no implication in the Rishonim that he had a halachic position that we're trying to learn. Everything we're learning is from Ravina's position and Rava's position.
Okay.
So let's quickly go through the story in the Gemara. If you have a Gemara in front of you, this is going to be best because I'm going to point out a number of things in Rashi and details, specifically in Rashi, and hopefully we'll get some clarity as we work through them. And we'll see how we go. So let's go through the story quickly. This is the first story. Top of the page, Hey Amud Aleph. First word. Ronyah Akfei Ravina Ma'aber Chaysav. Ronyah was enwrapped by Ravina on all four sides. So look in Rashi. Ronyah Akfei Ravina. Ronyah was enwrapped, or surrounded by Ravina. So it says Rashi, Dalet Sados Hayul Ravina. Ravina had 4 fields. Sevivois Arba Mitzarev Shal Ronyah, around the 4 borders of Ronyah's field. The Gidron and Ravina fenced them in. And by default, Ronyah's field is also fenced in. So I pointed this out last week. Rashi here says that Ravina had 4 fields, whereas in the story of our Mishnah, in the case of the Mishnah where the person has 3 fields surrounding his neighbor, Rashi says he bought 3 fields, whereas here he says he had 3 fields. We pointed out what that might mean. Amar lei, so Ravina told Ronyah, Havli kama de gidri, give me the amount that it cost me, or half the amount of what it cost me to build this wall. Says Rashi, Havli kama de gidri, give me the amount of it cost me to build this fence, half of that amount. And this is Rav Huna alib Rabbi Yossi. This is according to Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi, the Amar, which said, Hakol of Imasha Gadar, you have to give based on the amount that the person spent on the wall. The Haki Kaimalon, because this is the halacha, come on, as we'll see later. But this is the halacha. We're going to see later from the words of Rava, when they go to Din Torah and Rava Paskins, we're going to learn that the halacha is we follow Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi. Now, there's 2 players here. There's Rabbi Yossi, which is arguing with the Chachamim, and there's Rav Huna, which argues Rav Chia bar Rav. Right? Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim argue in the Mishnah. It's not quite clear what their argument is. And then the question becomes, in the Gemara that we learned last week, what is the machlekes? So we'll stick to Rav Huna now, not to Rav Chia bar Rav. But Rav Huna says that what's the essence of the machlekes between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim? That both Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim agree that it doesn't matter who built the 4th wall, whether the 4th wall was built by the guy on the outside or whether the 4th wall was built by the guy on the inside. Either way, the guy in the middle pays for half of all 4. Even if the guy on the outside built the 4th, even if the guy on the outside or the guy on the inside built the 4th wall. So that's important because in the case over here, Ravina's on the outside, he's the one that built the 4 walls. Right? Because in the previous Gemara, in some of the opinions of Rav Chia bar Rav, that's not necessarily the case. If the guy on the outside built all 4 walls, the guy on the inside could say, that was your business, not mine. But if the guy in the middle built the outside, then you might have to pay. But over here we're saying that even though Ravina is on the outside, he built the wall, still Ronyah in the middle has to pay. That's number one. Number two, what does he have to pay? Not that he has to pay the minimum amount for the cheapest kind of wall, but rather he has to pay half of what the guy on the outside spent. So it's Rav Huna and Rav Yossi. It's important to have both of these details there. It's important to remember this because as we go forward, when we get to the Mefarshim, we're going to see it's very important to remember this. Right? Two details. There's the fact that the guy on the outside built the wall, and that is enough to make the guy in the middle pay. That's one way of understanding Rabbi Yossi, or even Rav Huna's way of understanding Rabbi Yossi, right? Because Rav Chiza's way of understanding Rabbi Yossi, right? One of the opinions was in Rav Barav's learning was that the Chachamim say, the Tanna Kama says, you pay only when the guy in the middle builds the fourth wall. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says you pay, the last version of Rabbi Barav was Farkert, that the Tanna Kama says no matter who built it, you pay. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says only if the guy in the middle builds the fourth wall, then the guy in the middle is compelled to pay. If the guy in the middle didn't contribute to any of the building, he doesn't pay for anything. Right? That was Rabbi Yossi according to Rabbi Barav in the last version. Right, which wouldn't work here because Ravina is the one on the outside building all four walls. You have to have Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi. Right? Yeah. Okay, so get interrupt me if anything's not clear. Okay, so he asked him, so Ravina asked Ronyah, please pay me for the half of what I spent. Lo yoyevle, he wouldn't give it to him. Gemara continues, second line, top of the page. Havli lefikonim bezoil. Okay, so if you're not going to give me the half of what I spent, give me half of what it costs to make the cheapest kind of wall. Lo yoyevle, he still wouldn't pay for it. He still wouldn't give him. Ronyah still wouldn't give him the money. Then finally, Ravina said, Havli agranetidosa. Give me the amount it would cost for you to pay for a human scarecrow to protect your field. At least give me that, because at least that much you're enjoying of my fence. Lo yoivle, and Ronyah would still not give him anything. So this is part one of the story. Part one of this, I'm dividing it specifically into three, and you'll see why. This is part one of the story. Ravina built the walls around Ronyah's yard, and Ravina asks Ronyah to pay for his share, and asks him in three stages. First of all, pay for the total cost. Says no. Then says pay for what you would have paid for the cheapest version of wall. That still says no, or half of that. And he says pay for what it would cost to pay for a human scarecrow, and he still says no. Part one of the story. Part two of the story. One day, have a kagadri dikli. Ronyah, the guy in the middle, was collecting or harvesting his dates. Says Rashi, one day he was collecting. Ronyah was collecting dates from his field. Amarle, Ladri says, so Ravina told his artist, his sharecropper, his garden, his caretaker, the guy in charge of his field. Ravina told his employee, Zil shakamane kibura dahini. Go take a cluster of dates. Rashi says, Eshkol shel tamarim, take a cluster of dates, Mishal Ronyah that belong to Ronyah, ubefanav, and in front of him. It's a key word. Don't just do it when he's not looking. We're not looking to steal here. We're looking to provoke Ronyah into a reaction. So do it in front of him. In other words, and this is something that you said, Aaron, when we first learned the Gemara, it was 2 weeks ago, that it's not the pshat that Ravina was looking to steal because he thought he had the right to the dates. I paid for your protection of your dates, and therefore you owe me money, so I'm going to collect the money. That would be a kind of thievery. You don't collect money because you think you're owed if you walk into the guy's house and take the guy's property. You got to go to court. You got to go to Beis Din. So Rashi tells us that his instruction to tell him to take those dates was dafka b'fanav, in front of him, to make a point, to provoke a reaction. Okay, so the sharecropper, the artist, followed instructions. Says the Gemara continuing. Azo lasuye. So he went to go take these sharecroppers, these dates. Rama Bekala. Ronyah raised his voice. Says Rashi. Rama Bekala. Gar by Ronyah Barisa de Ravina. Ronyah started yelling at the sharecropper of Ravina. Amarle. So Ravina now says to Ronyah, watching him yell, Galis daitach, you now expressed your view, that you are happy with what I did. So says Rashi, Amarle, Ravina says to Ronyah, Galia daitach, you've expressed your view, Shechavivin had to call him, that the dates are precious to you, the nichalach b'shmirasa, and you're now happy with them being guarded. This is another distinction, by the way, here from the previous Gemara. In the previous Gemara, when the Gemara discusses the Mishnah, and the Gemara discusses the hypothetical of someone who built the fourth wall, Rashi says, the nichala behekefa, you're happy with being surrounded. Whereas here Rashi says, nichala b'shmirasan, you're happy with being guarded. And this is further to my point that I was making last week, that the Gemara, l'chatchila, in Rashi's view, is still talking about hezek re'iyah. Over here, is not talking about hezek re'iyah. Over here, the Gemara switches to dealing with protecting property against thieves or animals. And that's what Rashi says, nichalach b'shmirasan. You're happy with your stuff being protected, not the hakefa, like he says in the previous Gemara. We're happy being surrounded. You're happy with the privacy. Because privacy is not the issue. Privacy is being protected. People don't take your stuff. So by you yelling at my guy, you've now expressed that you're happy with your palm trees. He says, these things are precious to you, they're valuable to you. And it's good for you to have them protected by my fence, and therefore pay up. And therefore continues Ravina in the Gemara, let my person, my sharecropper be considered a goat at least. Mile boy neterusa, would you not need protection against that? Says Rashi, ela easy ba'alma, mile boy sacholo. Kolema meaning to say, afilu einach yarim minagadavim. Even if you're not afraid of thieves, you still have to guard them against goats. This Rashi is very much troubling me. I think I mentioned this once before. I learned in yeshiva from Rabbi Steinmetz, my Rosh Yeshiva back in Detroit. He said when Rashi says the word kolaymar, it means something's bothering Rashi. And he introduces his commentary by saying kolaymar, which means as if to say, what's wrong with the explanation? What's wrong with the Gemara? What's saying kolaymar? As if to say, what's bothering you? Especially since Rashi adds these words, even if you're not afraid of ganovim, you have to guard them from goats. Where did thieves come in here? Why introducing that? Rashi is making as if there's different levels of protection. And Ronyah was saying, I don't need your protection because I don't care about thieves, or I'm not afraid of thieves. And Ravina is proving to him, no, even if you're not afraid of thieves, you're still afraid of goats. Like Mehechatesa, where did this come in from? Where did this come in from? Since when is there concern with thieves? And why thieves yes and goats no? Or the way around, why thieves no, goats yes? Something's obviously bothering Rashi here that makes him say kolaymar and then add, pointing it out, I don't necessarily have any explanation. So says the Gemara, Amar Le, back in the Gemara, Amar Le, so Ronyah says back to Ravina, Iza ba'alma, a goat, all I have to do is yell at it or chase it away. Amar Le, so Ravina says back to him, don't you need someone to do that chasing? You say all you have to do for a goat is chase it away. Good. So you need to pay someone to chase it. So at least pay me for that. End of part 2 of the story. Says Rashi, don't you need someone to yell at him, to shout? Because the Vayirem, the word Vayirem, which comes up in the pasuk, Mitargaminon, Achle is translated as Achle, and Vayirem means to thunder, to yell. Every time an announcement is translated in Targum Yonasan, it uses the translation of Achle. I'm also not sure what Rashi is doing here, but I'd have to be a Kodenitza and know every single time that this is quoted and every single time Targum Yonasan translates it and which way they translate it to understand why Rashi is making this point. Meaning what's missing. Just translate the word. Lazik will look ahead and that lachli means to yell at them. Like we know, by Yirda mean betagiminim achli, period. But he adds a note. Every time there's this idea of calling out, Targum Yonasan translates it as achli. Just saying. Okay, so this is part 2 of the story. Part 1 of the story is where he asks him to pay first at the highest amount, and then less, and then less, and less, and less, and Ronyah freezes each time. Part 2 of the story is where he provokes Ronyah into demonstrating that he cares for at least to be protected from goats. And Rashi's like the way Rashi's writing it. Even if he doesn't care for thieves, he certainly protects for goats. And if he would protect for goats, he needs to pay someone to stand there. And now comes part 3 of the story. They now came to court. They now came to Rava. Amar lei, so Rava says to Ronyah, Zil paise b'maida payis. Go appease Ravina by that which he was willing to be appeased. Says the Rashi, paise b'maida payis. Toivlach, it would be good for you, li spayis, to be settled ba'aganatira with the amount of what it would cost to pay for a human scarecrow rather than paying for the expense of the full wall. Why? Because Ravina was okay accepting that. Because he told you earlier that he's okay if you were to just pay the amount it would cost to pay for this human scarecrow. Therefore, it's good for you to do that. The Eloi, says the Gemara continuing, the Eloi, and if you don't give him that, I'm going to make the halacha fall. I'm going to rule halachically. And if I rule halachically, you're going to have to pay following the opinion of Rav Huna and the name of Rabbi Yossi, or Rav Huna's opinion according to Rabbi Yossi, which is that you have to pay for half of the expense of the entire wall that Ravina spent. So this is the end of the story. This is part 3 of the story, where they actually get a ruling. And this says the Haggah, which is not Rashi, but the Haggah on the side. So this is the proof that this is the halacha. Okay. So a number of questions that I want to point out here. Actually, let's first go to the Nimukah Yosef. It's the last picture I sent you. We'll look at the Nimukah Yosef quickly, and I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and you'll tell me what you guys think. Okay, so it's the last picture I sent in the WhatsApp chat, if you have it there. We're looking at the Nimukah Yosef. Nimukah Yosef is very geschmack, explains the Gemara very, very smooth, as we've seen in the past. So let's see. He quotes the Gemara, which says Ravina. So it's with a little square bracket that says hey with a dot, and then Ravina. Okay, Ravina Hikif, he runs through the story, we'll go through it quickly. Ravina Hikif L'Runya Medal Drachaisav. Ravina surrounded Runya on 4 sides. Shahayu Loi Dal Tzadas Ravina. Ravina had 4 fields. Savav Sada Achas surrounding 1 field. Shal Runya of Runya. V'loirotza Runya to Floya Leklum, and Runya didn't want to pay him anything. Ma'osim Gdarim Shegad Ravina Savivai. From those fences that Ravina surrounded Runya, so he didn't want to pay for anything. So Amrle Ravina already say. So Ravina told his sharecropper, "Isili, go bring for me the Fnei Runya in front of Runya. At the time that he's collecting his dates." So he adds that. Rashi wrote that Ravina told his artist to go collect it in front of. Nimukah Yosef adds, at the time when he's collecting his dates, further emphasizing, I think, this point. That while he's busy with his dates, go take it from him to prove the point even more. And he said, go bring for me a cluster of dates. Azal, so the sharecropper went. And when the sharecropper wanted to take the dates, Gar by Runya yelled at him, Hanach, Hanach, put it down, put it down. Amar le Ravina, so Ravina say, Shafke, leave the dates alone. Daily, I got what I wanted. He said, this is enough for me. The fact that you yelled, and this is Mamish learning the way you were learning, Aaron. That he expressed his view that he likes it. Daily, I got that's enough for me. Lisa Daitach, you've expressed your view, the nicholaf my degadri, you're happy with the fact that I've fenced in the field. And he continues, lo yahel easy, let my sharecropper be considered like a goat. And even if you're not afraid of thieves, like Rashi said, at least you're still afraid of goats. Says certainly you would have to pay for someone to keep away the goats, or to yell at the goats so they don't enter into your field. Nonetheless, Ronyah didn't care about this argument. To even to give him the money that would cost to pay for that guy to scare the goats. So just before I go forward, the question we had on Rashi, why he's saying Kolemar, is Bapashtas, because why is Ravina invoking this mashal that let my sharecropper be like a goat, and you certainly would pay for someone to keep the goats away? Why doesn't Ravina say my sharecropper is a thief, and here you are yelling at a thief to go away? Don't you need to pay someone to push away thieves? So therefore Rashi has to say, what he means to say is, look, you're not worried about thieves, and this is an unusual case because my guy's not a thief either. But you certainly would have been afraid by goats because a goat is not, going to listen to me telling him not to go in. Whereas my others will. So this is probably why Rashi is saying Kolemar and adding that whole thing. But Haguf Akasha, why this is Ravina's argument? Why doesn't Ravina say, look, you care about thieves? Proof, my others is acting like a thief and you're yelling at him. But no, Ravina says, even if you don't care about thieves, you care about goats. And Rashi then has to go with this whole Kolemar business. Anyway. So the Nemuk Yosef continues. Also, look, I made the Rava. They came before Rava as a bezdin, as a judge. Amar Lei, and Rava told the Ronyah, Zil paisi b'mayde pais. Go appease by that which is being appeased. Tahainu, schar netira, pay for the amount it would cost for a human scarecrow. Shudavar mu'at, which is a very little amount. The shasha menace bekamasa, because all you have to do is pay for someone to sit there when the crops are in full bloom. It doesn't have to be the whole year round. Di'il v'iloi, and if not, da'inalach k'rabesi, I'm going to give you the din like Rabbi, the Amar Magalgal of Sakal, which says, you see, when we learned Rashi, I split it into two. There's Rabbi Hoina like Rabbi, and the order in the Gemara, as we have it, is Kirav Huna libud Rabbi, and that's how Rashi quotes it also. Kirav Huna libud Rabbi. I'm going to make the halacha follow Rav Huna as he translated Rabbi, whereas the Mukha Yosef has it the other way around, which makes the split easier. It makes the split progression easier. First, he says Rabbi Yossi. First of all, I'm going to make you follow Rabbi Yossi. What did Rabbi Yossi say? I make you pay for all four, not just one of the walls, not just the fourth wall. I make you pay for all four. Right? And in addition, not just making you pay for all four, but also a bit of Hunna. The Amar, which said, that when you pay for the four, you got to pay for the amount it would cost. You have to pay for what the guy paid, not just the amount of wood cost for a cheapest wall. Because this is how we paskin. Like Rabbi Yossi. But we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi, like one of the versions of Rabbi, which said that Rabbi Yossi only says Magalgan of Sakol when the guy in the middle built the fourth wall. But we follow Rabbi Yossi, Loishna Geder Nikif Eseravius, whether the guy on the inside built the fourth wall, or Makif, whether the guy on the outside built the fourth wall. And we paskin Vali B'der we also follow Rav Huna that when you pay for all four walls, you pay for the amount the guy paid. When the guy in the middle pays for his share in the all four walls, he pays based on the amount that the guy on the outside paid, rather than paying based on what it would cost for the cheapest version of a wall. This is also the pasking that is. So you can see Adam Tuvi is not here, but the next piece from the Ramban here addresses something that Adam said about Gilui Das. We'll leave it for another time. But you can see here like this, and this will lead into my questions. You can see here from the Mukha Yosef, from the one place, in some areas he sees further highlighting Rashi's point, which is that there's a Gilui Das. When Ronyah screams and says, leave, that's Dafka when he says, oh, you see, now you expressed your view that you enjoyed the wall, and therefore, pay me at least for what it costs for a scarecrow. So in that area, it's quite clear. And this is why I'm splitting into three stages in the story. right? The three stages in the story are, first they ask him to pay at the highest price. He says no. Lower price, no. Lower price, no. Nothing happens then. At that point, Ravina makes no claim. Ravina doesn't take him to Bezdin. But why not? Why not? If you have a rightful claim that the guy in the middle should pay for his part of the wall, why not take him to Bezdin right now? Just take him to Din Torah. What are you waiting for? No, you can't yet. You have to wait for the guy in the middle to express his view that he's happy with the walls on the outside. Because until now, Ronyah says, I don't care, I'm not paying. And because he says, I'm not paying, therefore Ravina can't take him to court yet. Because he didn't express his view that he's actually happy with the wall. Which is a Chiddush Din. It's a Chiddush Din. Right? Especially if you're going to go like a Rav Huna in the name of Rabbi Yossi. Right? Which is, we don't care if the guy on the inside built the wall and the guy on the outside built the wall. You always pay for the maximum amount. You always pay for what it would cost, what it cost, half of what it cost the guy on the outside to build. Where in Rav Huna and the name of Rabbi Yossi do you have this idea of Gilui Das? The whole idea of Gilui Das only came when we're trying to split hairs between when the guy in the middle builds it, and by him building it, he showed when the guy in the middle built the fourth wall, and therefore he expresses his view he's happy with the first three. And then we had a svara, Megal Mufsakol, you make him pay for the other three, because by building the fourth wall, he expressed his view that he's happy with the first three. But in Rav Huna's view, in the name of Rabbi Yossi, since when did they have Gilui Das? The Gemara never made such a statement. It seemed until this point that if you follow the Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi, it doesn't matter. You have Hana, pay up. But now the Gemara adds it later and says no. Ravina couldn't take him to court yet. Even though he asked him for the money, which would mean L'chura he has a legal claim. Why would Ravina ask for money if he doesn't have a legal claim? But he still couldn't take him to court yet. Because Ronyah said, no, I'm not paying. Only then, in phase 2 of the story, when Ravina, this is what you were saying, Aaron, I think last time, that when Ravina sends his artisan and Ronyah starts screaming, he says, no, don't take my dates. That's dafka when Ravina takes him to Rava. Ravina takes him to court now. Because now you expressed your view that you like it. Now here comes the most baffling thing. This is something that's really bothering me. What's the pshat in Rava's psak? What's Rava's psak? Pay up what Ravina is asking of you, which is the cheapest version. Just pay for the amount it would cost for you to have a human scarecrow. Because if you don't do that, I'm going to make you pay like the halacha, which is you should pay like a Ravina, which is you should pay for half of what the actual cost of the wall is. So is a judge giving a defendant legal advice? What's going on here? What kind of psak din is this? It's really bothering me. It's really strange. And this story is brought here to prove that the halacha follows Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi. But L'poil Rava lets him get away with the cheaper. So how does this prove to you that the halacha follows Rav Huna and Rabbi Yossi? He ends up letting him get away with the cheaper version. How does this story tell you that the halacha is if to pay for half of the actual cost? That's not what Ronyah paid, and that's not what the psak was. He said, if you don't, it's so mudman. Like, is it? What's the deal? Like, what is the psak? What's Rava's psak? Now, l'chura, this is why Rashi adds those words. Look in the Rashi, Pais v'mada pious. Toivlach would be good for you. Lispayes ba'agadatira. Because he agreed to it. And then the Gemara goes on to say, because if not, then I'm going to give you a din. Which means right now I'm not doing a din Torah yet. It's before din Torah. And because it's before din Torah, and Ravina is happy taking the little amount, you can give him the little amount. But once you force my hand to go, I'm still stuck with this idea that he's giving a defendant legal advice. But once he's relying on the fact that Ravina is hoyel v'nesratz lakach, because Ravina is accepting of it. Therefore, it's all okay. But be'etzem, the halacha is you should pay for half. And if you force me to go to court, then I won't rely on the fact that Ravina is accepting. I mean, this still requires lots of explanation. But I'll tell you what does get clarified here. And that is, why is the first part of the story important? The ikar of the story is that Rava said, okay, well, there's two main parts of the story here, right? The second and the third. First of all, the fact that Ronyah is megaladas, which is a chiddush din. It's a new thing. We did not know this in the previous sugya, from last week's Gemara. But now we're finding out that in order for the guy in the middle to be mechuyev, to pay for the four walls, he has to express his opinion that he's happy with the walls. Even if you're paskin like Rav Huna and Rabbi. That's a chiddush din. And then there's Rava's psak, there's Rava's ruling, which tells us that you have to pay, like Rav Huna and Rabbi, that you have to pay for half of the actual expense. Those are the two parts of the story. But why is the first part of the story important? When Rabinah asked him for the highest price, he said no. Then he went down, he said no. He went down, he said no. Why is that nageya? What's the din there? What's being taught to us there? I think the reason is, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think the reason is like this. Because from Rava's psak alone, you not necessarily would rule that the halacha follows Rav Huna and Levi Rabbi Yossi. From Rava's psak alone, you might have come to the conclusion that you can get away with paying less. Rava said that if you don't pay him the little amount, I'm gonna take you to din, and then you're gonna pay the whole amount. Right? That alone isn't enough because, like I asked before, hagufa. If the din is you have to pay for the full amount, why is he letting you get away with less? Right? So I think it would seem to me that the fact that we follow Rav Huna and the Nimra B'Yossi comes from the fact that Ravina demanded he pay that much lechatchila. Ravina is also an Amida. He's also one of the Talmid Chachamim. And if he came and asked his neighbor to pay that amount, it's because by law he's allowed to demand that much. He just never had the Gili Das for it. And therefore couldn't demand. But what does he have Gili Das for? What does he have Gili Das for? Only Gili Das for protection against goats. And this maybe is why Ravina is going to Rava. And Rava says, it's still not perfect for me. And Rava says, because Ravina is willing to accept a cheaper payment, therefore you should go ahead with that. Because if we go by the book, once you express your opinion that you're happy with the wall, you got to pay for the whole half of the wall, for half of the whole wall. It's still strange to me that Rava is giving him legal counsel. But I think the legal counsel only comes because of the first half of the story. Because Ravina himself, when he's demanding payment, he's demanding in accord to Ronyah's Gili Das, which is why he first asked him for this amount. He says no, tries a less amount. He still says no, tries a less amount. Till he finally tricks him into admitting that he's happy with the least amount possible. As if there's two elements needed here. First of all, you have to have Gili Das of the person receiving benefit. And number two, you have to have a demand from the guy the guy asking for money. And if you don't have a demand from the guy asking for money, then not necessarily do you have to pay for the whole amount. But then once you come to Beis Din, then we are going to force you to pay for the whole amount. It's a very strange thing, and I really don't have clarity in it, but I don't know. Anyway.
What about that?
Yeah.
He never built a wall. He was Megal Das. Ronyah. He was Megal Das that he wanted the shmira to protect his dates.
Mhm.
But according to the Mishnah, according to Rav Huna, he had to build a wall.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That never happened in the story.
According to Rav Huna, it's Leishna Nikif, Leishna Makif. Doesn't matter who built the wall. Right? The distinction between Nikif and Makif comes in Rav Chia bar Rav, not Rav Huna. But you're onto something. Let's look in the Rashba, the pictures I sent you there, because that what you just asked is a segue into that, and maybe we'll get some more clarity when we see this. Where is it? Oh, here. Hachi Goddess Rashi, you have it? This the first and second picture I sent today in the WhatsApp. So he's quoting back from the Gemara from last week, where Rashi said, Iboy Sema, one of the ways of understanding, so it's Rashi's Girsa, right? We pointed out that there's two different Gersais. Rashi ignores the first Mishnah, which means he doesn't have that in his Girsa. Right? So says Rashba. Hachi Goddess Rashi, this is Rashi's version of the Gemara, which says, Iboy Sema, that one of the ways of understanding the machlokes between Tanakam and the Chachamim is Nikif u'Makif hikabenayu. Difference is who's building the wall, the guy in the middle or the guy on the outside, on the fourth wall. Tanakam Savar, the Tanakam is of the view it doesn't matter who built the wall, whether you're on the inside or the outside, you still pay for all four, right? Whereas Rabbi Yossi says that only if the guy on the inside built the wall, right? So already over here, you could see that the story of the story of Ronyah and Rava is not specifically Rav Huna or Rabbi Yossi. It could even be Tanakama or Levi Rav Barav. But only the problem then is you would pay for all four walls, yes, but the cheapest version of a wall. So you have to have both Rabbi Yossi and Rav Huna, right? So you pointed out from the Mukha Yosef from Rashi. So continues the Rashba. Now, Ba'asi is Sugya Dahacha, this version, in this part of the Gemara, which says that Rav Yossi's, when Rav Yossi says to Mechayah, the guy in the middle, to pay for all four, is limited to only when the guy in the middle builds the fourth wall, right? That goes to Sugya the Perek to that I go. This follows the Gemara in Bava Kama. And we saw this in Tosafos also, that the Gemara in Bava Kama is limited to that version of the Gemara. And my father Shasim, because the Gemara over there in Bava Kama says, the Gadol is that if the guy on the outside built the third, fourth, and the first, second, and third wall on the outside, Potter, then he doesn't have to pay for anything. The guy in the middle doesn't have to pay for anything because the fourth wall is still open. But if the guy on the outside built the fourth wall, then Chayiv, then he is obligated to pay for the middle. And this is all Tanakama. But Rabbi Yossi Omer, Im Amad the Gadol Servius, if the guy in the middle built the fourth wall, and says the Gemara in Bava Kama, Time Adamad Nikif. The reason why he pays for the four walls is because the guy in the middle built the fourth wall. And by building the fourth wall, he expressed his happiness with the first three walls. Hamakif, but the guy on the outside builds the fourth wall, Potter doesn't have to pay. Okay, this we knew already. Now continues the Rashba. Upashas the Mashmisan, the simple reading of our Mishnah, Haki Mashma, indeed implies that the guy in the middle is the one who builds the fourth wall. Because Midikatani, from the fact that the Mishnah says, the guy on the outside built the first, second, and third wall, then you don't obligate the guy in the middle to build it, to pay for it. Mashma, the implication is, that if the guy on the outside continues the building and builds the fourth one, you do make it pay. Tanakama. Again, please interrupt me if it's not clear. Rabbi Yossi, Nami, the Omar, and then Rabbi Yossi comes along and says, Im Omad, if he got up and built the fourth wall, Mashma, the implication is, She'omad Achshav, that somebody new got up now, Mishloy Omad Adayan, someone who hasn't done till now. No, it's till now the Mishnah is talking about the first three walls built by the guy on the outside. That's clear. And then when Rabbi Yossi says, Im Omad, if someone got up and built the fourth wall, who's getting up now to build the fourth wall? Someone new. The Hainu Nikif, this is the guy in the middle. Okay, so this we already know from last week's Gemara. I hope this is clear. If it's not, please stop me because we'll get to go forward in a second. Now, now that which we say later, the Amarle Rava Ronyah, our Gemara today. Rava tells Ronyah, Zil Paisi, go give Ravina the minimum amount that he asked for, which is the amount to pay for a human scarecrow. Viloy, and if you don't pay for that minimal amount, Daina Lak Rabbi Yossi, I'm going to give you the psak din like Rabbi Yossi that you have to pay for all four walls. Ba'alibad Rav Huna, and according to Rav Huna, which says that you have to pay for the cost of the actual expense, not just the cheapest version of a wall. So what's the mashma? The implication is that Rabbi Yossi Machayev, that Rabbi Yossi obligates paying for four walls, afilu b'makif, even if the guy on the outside built it. Right? V'hasam, but over there, in our Gemara today, Ravinu degaderes kulam. Ravinu built all four walls, and he's on the outside. And l'chura, according to this last version of the Gemara we just quoted before, Rabbi Yossi is of the view that only if the guy in the middle builds the fourth wall, not if the guy on the outside builds the fourth wall. Right?
That's what I said. He said no. No?
Oh, so it says answers. We might suggest this version that says now, the Benikif, Umakif Pligi, which says that Tanakama and Rabbi are arguing about who builds the wall, guy on the inside, the guy on the outside. It's only according to Rabbi Barav. Because the Gemara here is to explain his opinion. Right, Rabbi Barav, which said that when Rabbi Yossi obliges you to pay for all four walls, he's only obligating you to pay for the amount of cost for a cheapest wall. So the Gemara asks, if so, what's the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi? Tanakama also says you have to pay for all four walls. Answers the Gemara, according to this third version, the question is, who built the fourth wall? It's only according to Rabbi Barav that we make this distinction between whether the guy on the inside or the guy on the outside built the wall. But according to Rav Huna, we're not arguing about the guy on the inside and the guy on the outside. Klal at all. Whether you're following Tanakama, whether you're following Rabbi Yossi, according to Rav Huna, it makes a difference who built the wall. Whether the guy on the inside built the wall, the guy on the outside built the wall. And the only argument between Rabbi Yossi and Tanakama, according to Rav Huna, is whether you pay for all four walls or not. That's it. According to Tanakama, you pay for just the fourth wall. Or not at all, actually. No, I say. Yeah, you pay for the fourth wall. No. Sorry. According to Tanakama, you'd be paying for the cheapest version of a wall. You pay for all four walls, but the cheapest version of them. And the whole sugya of Ronyah and Avina, Azla, Kamosh Kasatsi goes like this, Lamaila, like above. No, sorry, Vakulu sugya is Bahacha and Azla, and the entire sugya goes according to this way. Kamosh Kasatsi, as explained before, which we didn't learn. Kai Lishna Basra. V'sugya the Perek Ketzat. Asi Kai Lishna Basra. Until finally Rabbi was compelled to a corner to go like this last version, which said that Rabbi Yossi and Tanakama are arguing about who builds the wall. And the Gemara and Bava Kama follows that. But we don't follow this last version according to Rabbi Barav, which makes a distinction between who built the wall. We follow Rav Huna, which says it makes a difference who built the wall. And the only question is whether you pay for the amount it would cost for a cheap wall, Tanakama, or whether you pay for the amount that was actually spent, Rabbi Yossi. Behind the Rava, this is what Rava is saying. Okay. Now, before we go further to the next paragraph, which is important, I want to point out that I don't think Rashi is learning this way. And I'll tell you why.
And the Aina Kamalan to Rav Huna, we go like Rav Huna.
which says there's no difference between who built the wall. Plus, like Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Huna, which says to pay for the full cost of the wall, not just the cheapest version. Not to make on a bezol, but rather, what's the expression? Amai de Godar.
And it's no difference if it's the makif or the nikif who
That's
built
correct.
the wall.
That's right. So as I said, there's two things here. It's side of Huna and Rabbi Yossi. Right? Now, if you look in Rashi, Havli Kama de Gidri. Third line, top of the page. So as I mentioned, and I pointed this out, the Mukhi Yosef has the same girsa as the Shitmik says here, which puts Kirab Yossi and then Alibud Rav Huna. Right? What was the expression here? Kirab Yossi Ba'alibud Rav Huna. Whereas over here we have the other way around. Kirab Huna Alibud Rav Yossi. Rav Huna first and then Rav Yossi. Right? And which of the two things does Rashi quote? There's two elements here. Number one, there's the fact that you pay for all four. B'chlal. Right? Because according to some opinions, you wouldn't be paying for all four. Or you wouldn't be paying at all, actually, because the guy on the outside built it. Right? And then the second element is the Amar Kol Mashagada. That you pay based on what I paid, rather than based on the cheapest version. Rashi only quotes that second element, the Amar Kol Mashagada. They didn't quote the other part, the Megalgal and Avasakol. Right? Because the Megalgal and Avasakol could even work according to Tanakama. It's Dafka Rav Huna Libud Rabbi Yossi. Following? So Rashi Lechatchila avoids this whole problem, I think, by putting it in this order. Because the question from the Rashba only began, because if the Gemara first says follow Rabbi Yossi, well, Rabbi Yossi can be talking about Nikif. And here it's the Makif doing the building.
That's what it's, and it says Amad, right? Isn't that Amad Lagadar?
That's right. That's right. But that's right. So, and that's what Rabbi Yossi seems to be implying. In other words, like this: right. See, there's the problem. If Rabbi Yossi is limited to Amad, the Nikif did it, right? That's what Rabbi Yossi is limited to. Then saying you're following Rav Huna like Rabbi Yossi it doesn't help you because the Makaf over here built the wall. Right? So if we put Rabbi Yossi first and then Rav Huna, you're stuck with a problem here. Rabbi Yossi himself only says Nikaf, which is why the Rashba says Yesh Leimar, that when we say there's a chiluk between Nikaf and Makaf, it's only one version of the Gemara, and the Gemara in Ketz of the Regel and Pavakama Taka follows that one version, but we don't follow that one version. And I think by Rashi putting Rav Huna first, you avoid that. Because Rav Huna comes right after the statement from the Gemara, where the Gemara says, Loishno Nikif, Loishno Makif. And then the Gemara says, Ikma Rav Huna Amma, called from Ashagadar. So it's not Rav Yossi alibud Rav Huna. It's Rav Huna alibud Rav Yossi. Meaning, first of all, take Rav Huna's premise. But then between Rav Yossi and what's Rav Huna's premise? Rav Huna's premise is Loishno Makif, Loishno Nikif. Even according to Tanakama. And according to Rav Yossi. And then alibud Rav Yossi, who says Hakoil. What's Pshat Hakoil? Called from Ashagadar. Whereas Tanakama says you only pay to make on a bazoil. So I think that's why I think Rashi avoids it by putting Rav Huna first. Rav Huna alibud Rav Yossi rather than saying alibud Rav Yossi, Rav Huna, or I'm sorry, Rav Yossi alibud Rav Huna. I think. But let's go even further now.
The whole Ikabanahu is brought as a separate discussion, or it's in continuation to answer something before that?
It's to answer Rav Chia Barav. Rav Chia Barav, who says that when Rav Yossi said Hakoil, Magalgal of Hakoil, he meant to make on him bezoil. If that's the case, then why is it different than the kind of Kama? Who also says Machayev and I say when there's Gadar Revius. So we answer depends who built it, or the other answers you give there. But Rav Huna, who said that Megalgal of Sakal means Hakol of Imashagodar, then his answer is there is enough commitment between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanna Kama says Meikonim Bazoil, and Rabbi Yossi says Hakol of Imashagodar. So it's Rav Huna libud Rabbi Yossi. Rav Huna's teaching Rabbi Yossi, not Rabbi Yossi, and then the way Rav Huna taught it. And then you're stuck. Well, did Rabbi Yossi even say Amad Makif? It's lechatchila. Rav Huna proved to Rabbi Yossi. So I think Rashi is doing by changing the order, which is our version of the Gemara, by the way. Okay, Rav Huna libud Rabbi Yossi. Yep. And they put a goyis b'tziyunim, Rabbi Yossi before, and the Haggah also has Rabbi Yossi before. But Rashi, in this Dibra Maskal Havli Kama de Gidri, Rav Huna libud Rabbi Yossi puts Rav Huna first. And I think it's going to avoid this issue. Okay, is that clear? Because I want to read the next piece also. Okay, if it's not, please let me know. It says now is the Rashba Vaiter. Inami, another way of understanding, Yesh the Farish might explain. The Hadar Rava, when Rava paskins, that Ronyah should pay for the minimal amount. Because if not, I'm going to make you pay for the maximal amount. Afil lahu sugya, the Perek ketzat. This follows, this is a Gavaldik Inyan, and I think it's going to answer a major question that I was having on Rashi. So I'll tell you in a minute. So the Hadar Rava, this is what Rava paskins, that you pay for that you would pay for if you would go to court all the way. You'd have to pay for the maximum amount. You have to pay for half of what Rabinah spent. This even follows the Gemara in Perek case of the Regal, the Gemara Babakama, and that would follow the opinion, which is that Rabbi Yossi limits his Megalgal, limits it to what? Limits it to when the guy in the middle built it, but over here Ravina built it. So if Rabbi Yossi is of the view that it's Amad Nikif, as the Gemara implies in Baba Kama, and according to his last version in the Gemara here, and as we said, is the Pashas Lashon Mishnah Amad, and over here L'chora Ravina is the Makif. He's the one building it. So why is he mechuyev to pay for all four? Says that Ashba the Hacha Asir Shaper. Here it goes very well. The shiny Hacha, and you have to make a distinction between our Gemara, the story of Rina and Ronyah, versus the Mishnah, versus the Sugya and the Mishnah. The Ravina, because Ravina, the Gadar Arba Asim Avas Achas, Ravina put up all four walls at one time. Ubechiha, and if all four walls go up at once, Kula Alma Moed Chayev Al Kulan. Everybody agrees you have to pay for all four because they all came at once. When do we say that you need the guy on the inside to build it in order to make him pay for the other four, for the other three? Is only when three went up and the guy in the middle had no benefit because the fourth side's open. And because he has no benefit, doesn't pay anything. And then when the fourth guy puts the fourth wall, I'm not going to make him pay now. When the guy on the outside puts the fourth wall, I'm not going to make the guy on the inside pay for the other three because he already got away. He already got away with those walls being free. It's only after when he in the middle builds his fourth wall, then he expressed himself that he really likes it, and therefore he's got to pay for all four. So if that's the case, and everybody agrees, then what's the chiddush of the Gemara bringing the story that we follow Rav Huna libud Rav Yossi? If anyways everybody agrees you pay for all four because you put all four at once, and if you put all four at once and the complete benefit of the walls come to you simultaneously as the guy in the middle, and therefore you're mechuyev on all of them. So what's the chiddush din if everybody agrees you're mechuyev? So says the Rashba, Ela the Rav Huna, but according to Rav Huna, Lefi Masha Gadar, you pay for how much the wall cost. To make on a bazoil. And there's machlekes, which means, is this clear? Hope it's clear. Be a nod, it's clear. Yeah. What Moshe want to say?
It's clear, but then it sounds, and what's the story doing here b'chla?
Oh,
With this Mishnah.
oh, all it's telling me is that we follow Rav Huna. But Be'ikr, like you just asked, which is my big question on Rashi, and this is the question here. How b'chlal is this a raya? Okay, wait, before we get to that question. First of all, if so, the Gemara doesn't have to mention Rabbi Yossi. Just mention Rav Huna. Why does the Gemara mention Rabbi Yossi alibud Rav Huna? I guess because only Rav Huna that says in Rabbi Yossi that you're mechuyev to pay for the full amount. Whereas Tanakama would say, even according to Rabbi Yossi, you're only paying Mekanim B'Zoil. Okay? But Rav Huna, according to Tanakama, is also Mekanim B'Zoil, which is why it has to be a Rav Huna alibud Rabbi Yossi. Okay, that's clear. But like you're asking, which is the big question, how b'chlal is this sugya a raya for the previous sugya, 50 different cases? What's the raya that we follow Rav Huna in the case of our Mishnah? Maybe we don't follow. Right? Especially, let's walk it through. Especially if we're going to learn that, like we did last week, that Rashi on the Mishnah and the Gemara that followed the Mishnah, which we learned last week, is dealing with the issue of hezek re'iyah, an issue of privacy. Now, if the issue is privacy, then maybe that's why they're arguing about whether or not there's a viable reason to make him pay for the walls. Because in a bika be'etzim, there is no privacy. And a bika doesn't require walls. It just so happens, because of however we explain it, there's an extreme case where you're protecting all four sides, then there's an issue that we might make you pay for it. But in the case of Ronyah and Ravina, where it's a question of the animals marching in, it's a whole different case. So maybe talk over there, everybody agrees, you pay for all four. Tanakama, Rabbi, everybody agrees. What b'chlal that I from one case to the other?
The animals walking in, that was all in Bava Kama, no?
Sorry?
The case that is
okay,
animals
the
walking
Bava
in.
Kama is true, but it's also here in Ronyah. Because
Right.
Ravina tells Ronyah, you're certainly happy with no goats coming into your property. So if the issue between Ravina and Ronyah is an issue of animals walking in, how is it a raya to the Gemara benegeh to hezek re'iyah? If we're talking two different cases. And even like the Rashba, two different cases. Because the case of Ravina is where he built them all four at once. But the case of the Mishnah is where he built them one at a time, making them different scenarios.
And that's also in Bava Kama, no? That if you build all four walls at once, or you build only three, and then you're putter from three, and then you build the fourth, and it's a new din, because the first din
That was in the Rashi in the bottom here. That was in the Rashi in the bottom here. But yeah, that was in the Rashi in the bottom.
Bava Kama, when do we putter you from the first three walls?
In Bava Kama, I don't remember in Bava Kama, but certainly in Rashi in the bottom over here in Dawud and Beis. The Rashi the Tana Kama Savar. Shekrayotzi yedei bezdin mehem. Shekrayotzi mehem b'zakar bezdin. Right. So I think the key to this is I'm still missing some pieces, and I'm putting all my thoughts on the table, and you'll do with them as you will. But I think the key to this is the first half of the story. The fact that Ravina demanded at the beginning, he demanded, give me as much as I paid. Meaning like this, and this is what the Rashba is kind of hinting to, what the Rashba is saying, I think. Even if Rabbi agrees that when the guy builds all four of them at once, you have to pay. And even if Rabbi agrees that when the guy builds all four at once, you have to pay, you have to, what's the word, no? Yeah, even if Tanakam agrees that when you put all four at once, you have to pay for all four of them. But there's no raya to say you pay for anything more than when you in the middle enjoy. And by Ravina first asking, give me the amount that I paid for, it must be according to Rav Huna and according to Rabbi Yossi. Because the only one who says to pay for the full amount of what I paid in any scenario is Rav Huna in the name of Rabbi Yossi. Because even if Tana Kama agree, even if Rav Chi Barav agrees that you have to pay for all four walls, there's no raya that he says to pay for the amount I paid. So even though it's a different case, but I think from Ravina's demand you get this raya, which is why Rashi puts it there. Havli kama de gidri. Because that's the Iker Chiddush. The Iker Chiddush is a call of Mashagadar, not in the Megalgal of Zakal. Because you put it up all four at once, and because over here it's an issue of Shein V'Rego Behemis, everybody agrees that you're Megalgal of Zakal. The Chiddush here is the Mashagadar. That's the only thing Rashi mentions. That's the only Chiddush here. Because as far as paying for all four walls, Beikanim Bezol, even Rabbi Yosef would agree. Even Tanakh, everybody would agree with that. So it's the demand of Rabbi Yosef, of Ravina, that's bringing us this Chiddush din. And even so, the Chiyuv only comes when he's Megaladas. I'm still not 100% clear on this. And
the last Rashi says he's pasuk like v'chein pasuk.
Say again?
The last Rashi, they call the hachi al-chasa.
V'chein pasuk ben Chananel. But this is how it goes. It says afterwards, Talmidim Merin Shmuel. It's the Rashbam. It's not actually Rashi. Because Rashi told us the halachas earlier, when Ravina spoke. Right? The big question that's bothering me that I'm not understanding, that I like to get something clarity on, is how Rava is giving this guy legal advice. He's a judge and he's giving the defendant legal advice, telling him don't come to court, because if you come to court, I'm going to make you pay more. What's the pshat in this? What's the pshat in this? Well, what's the pshat in that psak?
I don't know. It seems like we didn't see the Mefarshim say anything like this, but the fact that it seems like it's not dealing with our sugya because it's all four walls at once, and then Rav was telling him, Ravina offered you just to pay the cheapest, so take advantage before you come to base. Then it's like teaching us midos, like it's like how to be go lift in Mishra Sadin and give him be a nice guy, and that's what it's teaching us. Otherwise,
the expense of somebody else's legal claim.
Well, it's Ravina. It's not just somebody. I mean,
so that's what you have to say. That's why you have to say hoyel v'nesratz lakach. It's only because he agreed to it earlier. So Ravina's agreeing to it earlier gave us two sides of the spectrum. It gave us all ends of the spectrum. It told us, number one, that you're mechuyev be'etzem to pay for all of it, and the moment you express the fact that you're happy with this, you have to pay for the whole thing. Ravina is demanding that whole thing at the beginning. But then, because Ravina allowed to get, in other words, because Ravina allowed himself to go to be let off the hook by a lesser amount, therefore the defendant can give the lesser amount. But somehow the nisratz lakach does not extend once the din Torah starts. Because once the din Torah starts, you lost it. Done. No more nisratz lakach. You got to go by the letter of the book. Right? In other words, they're settling things out of court. The toivlach, it's good for you to do this, because if you come to court, right? Because all deals are a good deal in halacha. I can relinquish rights, right? I can give up my rights.
What's the Hagai Sabach on that Rashi? Toivlach sheniyos?
Where is that? The Gimel?
Yeah.
I don't know what does that word mean. No, I'm not sure.
Maybe it's like naos, like it's
Yeah, you should
nice.
be- you should
it's
be-
nice to
Yeah.
do that. Pleasant.
Sheniyah is that you should be willing. Maybe that you should be willing to misbias. You should be willing to be appeased by that amount.
That supports my theory.
That what?
It's telling you how to be a mensch.
Right, but it's coming at the. In other words, if Ravina did that, which by the way, it's not a crazy theory because the next story is all about being a mensch, right? The next story is Rav Safra telling Ravina to be a mensch and to let Ronyah buy the property. And here Rav is telling Ronyah to be a mensch, to take it. So maybe, but it's just interesting to me that like a guy comes to a Rav, Ravina took him to Rav. Did he not take him to Rav for din Torah? And Rav says, pause, before we start din Torah, I'm going to give the defendant legal advice to avoid all of this. It's only because Hoyel v'nisratz lakach. Clearly, Hoyel v'nisratz lakach. Only because he agreed.
There's a chassidus Rav.
Yeah. Anyway, but one thing I do get clear here is that I see this following very much with what we learned last week, in that the Gemara until now is talking about Hazakriya, and it switches to the issue of Shem v'Rekel Behemis, and yet it still brings a raya from here to the previous Gemara. Why? Because I call it from Mashakadar. Not because Megalgal and Vasakal. Megalgal and Vasakal, everybody agrees. The Ikir is the Omar call it from Mashakadar, which is why it's Rav Huna libid Rabbi Yosi, not Rabbi Yosi libid Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yosi is not the Ikir here. Tanakama also agrees with Megalgal and Vasakal. It's Rav Huna libid Rabbi Yosi that's the key here. That to me I think is clear, and a lot of you can come into place then. Like we said before, Nichol Abishmirasan. But still, though, the Kolaymar Afilu Einich Yerem Ganovim is something that I'm not clear on either. Like, why is he talking not afraid of Ganovim? Why is he talking not afraid of Ganovim? They're only goats. And I'm not sure. Maybe goats are cheaper. Goats are even cheaper to protect against than thieves. I don't know. Upon him, this is what I have here. Oh, there's a Tosafos here. Okay, just look at the last. Okay, it's not right to do a half a Tosafos. Okay, we'll do maybe a Tosafos tomorrow. And then, okay, so we'll do the Tosafos tomorrow, and we'll do the next story in Rabinah and Ronyah. And next week we'll get the new sugya of the Cheskas and Nasan Atz Yavidaya Shalei Nasan. Big famous sugya.
Shkoyach.
Good night, Eden.
Night.
Good night.